thousands and thousands and thousands of years in third density, which is where we are now, without ever graduating, because nobody needed to help each other, and that's the whole point. The changes on the Earth that we're seeing now, all the upheavals with the honeybee collapse, and then with the SARS virus, and with the Earth changes and the solar system changes, and the government conspiracies and corruption, and the fossil fuels dwindling, and the gas prices are going up, and the economy might collapse, and all these things that are happening are designed to sort of make us uncomfortable so that we draw together and that we find a way to connect with each other and become more at peace as a society. And we start seeing how the path of separation and pulling each other apart doesn't work anymore, that we have to come together as a unified consciousness. So when you're dealing with evolution in the universe, it was very early in our creation that one of the galaxies represent the primordial creators. They basically set up a whole system of evolution of 22 archetypes, 22 basic experiences that every person on every planet will go through in that galaxy. And wherever you are, now there is a veil between the conscious mind and the superconscious mind, meaning that you can consciously believe that God has abandoned you, that you have no connection to the universe. That is the seed of the negative path. The seed of the negative path is separation. The pain of feeling that God doesn't exist or God has abandoned you leads to you feeling like no one else has any value. When you start awakening to these laws of the cosmos, the radiant mind energy that's all over the cosmos, you then feel that you have become a God where none existed. And therefore everyone else is like insects compared to where you are. And that in order to enlighten them, you have to enslave them. That's the basis of the negative path. There are entities who believe this way who are higher evolved than human, higher evolved than the people on the planet at this time. And they are trying to come to this planet, trying to take over. However, those seventh density beings I spoke of before, known as the Guardians, their job is to create this wall of protection around the Earth, which is called a quarantine. And that basically ensures that, that they will never be able to invade. Now, because we as a planet are not uniformly positive, we have a blending of positive and negative influence. That means the average person may, on the one hand, say, I love you to their spouse, and then go and cheat on them with somebody else. Okay? A lot of people on this planet think of themselves as, they say, well, we're basically good people. We're all basically good at heart. In the Diary of Anne Frank, that famous line she says at the end, here she's been tortured by the Nazis, right? And she says, but I do believe that we're all really good at heart. Well, that's actually the problem, is that there are people who are doing very negative things who believe that they're basically good at heart. And they're not dealing with the disconnect between the good part and the part that's hurting people. So you might have a guy who says, well, I love my wife and I support my family, but yet he's going out to strip bars or he's cheating on her with somebody else. When mass murderers and murderers in general have been interviewed when they're on death row, they don't say, I'm this terrible killer. They almost invariably will have justified the murder for whatever reason, even if it's people that they didn't know and they had no connection to. They will come up with some reason for why what they did was a good thing. So we as a planet are in a situation where we are doing negative things, but we're not aware that they're negative, and that's a major problem that we have. So as a result, we end up forcing ourselves to have these negative greetings, as they're called. We have these entities around us that could provide a perfect protection from negative entities interfering with our planet, if we had the mandate as a society to be only positive. But we don't. We're creating negative energy in our own lives, like by lying to people. That's a great example. If you can look somebody in the eye and know that you're not telling them the truth, but you're doing it basically for your own benefit, then in some small way you're sending some energy out there that will allow a negative greeting to happen in your own life, which means you might have bad karma. You might suddenly hit your head on the door and you're bleeding, and or it could also be something that happens to the whole planet. This is why we have corrupt government. This is why we have environmental degradation. This is why we have earth changes. The earth changes are actually very much like what the primitive society said. The Earth is a living organism. If we were getting along harmoniously as a people, we would not be having earthquakes, we would not be having hurricanes, tornadoes, none of that stuff would be happening. It's a projection of our disharmony. And a great way that I saw that happen was during the Israel-Lebanon war last year. The tensions of everybody's mind got really, really tweaked out on the planet. And then there was a global heat wave. I mean, here in LA, it was horrible. You guys remember that? It was like I was lying there in bed because I didn't have air conditioning in my apartment in Santa Monica, and I was dying from the heat. And it was all over the place. It was Europe, it was Asia, it was North America, South America. Well, it was because everybody was freaked out that the Israel-Lebanon war could create World War III, Armageddon in the Middle East. There was this huge fear in the planet, and that stops the energy from flowing through the planet the way it should. It gets bottled up and creates this unusable heat, which causes us to have these earth changes. So these guardians, these seventh dimensional beings, again, create this bulletproof shield around the earth, but because we invite incursion by our negativity, there are certain random windows that will be opened, and that is mandated. Nobody knows when it will happen until it happens, but when they open, you get what's called a UFO wave or a saucer wave. Most of the UFOs that you see in the sky are negative entities. Most of the UFOs are negative. There are some that are positive, but the majority of them are the negative side. Doesn't mean they're going to hurt you necessarily. You will not be affected by these UFOs unless you have invited it in your own life by basically being overtly negative. So that's another good incentive to stay on the positive path and try to do the right thing for other people and try to be positive, supportive, uplifting, loving.
So how do you make sense of the fact that you've got people going through abduction scenarios like Jim Sparks, who you may not be familiar with personally, but who we heard speak and who's written a book called The Keepers, and who was conscious during his, experiences or contact experiences, however you want to frame it. And basically, he's being taught how to make the earth a better place. Mm-hmm. They're being shown. He says there are group abductions that he's seen, that they're being educated by these ETs to basically save the earth.
Okay, that's a good question. This gets into this. We're in one of these gray areas, which is very strange, and that is that the positive side likes to call themselves the Confederation, and it's basically a group of 53 some odd civilizations that have all come together and that are basically acting as sort of like a celestial government for our little sector of the galaxy. Ra, the group that I've worked with, and it's in the Law of One series, is just one of the entities in the Confederation, one of many, of 53. Now they basically oversee what they call the management and transfer of planetary populations. In a situation like what you described, there are entities in the Confederation 4D and 5D that use UFOs to travel, and they will sometimes bring people on board the ships and give them positive spiritual teaching. So that is sometimes what happens. Now you will have situations in which people have been contacted and they have what appears to be kind of like an abduction. The main difference between a negative abduction and a positive contact is a negative abduction, you will have the feeling like you're a lab animal, like you're basically not cared for, not respected, you're in terror, you're in fear. You'll be probed and prodded and scoop marks on your body and so forth. A positive contact will be something where you feel inspired, uplifted, and you're given a message of hope and peace for this planet. It is a very important thing to point out that many people start out by being contacted by good guys, Confederation entities, and then end up not following the teachings that they're given. And when that happens, if you start diverting from the teachings you're given, for example, many channelers start to think they're the Messiah. It's very, very common. You think, well, I'm talking to the extraterrestrials.